Welcome everyone to the Fantasy Phoenix podcast, here to give you tips for NBL SuperCoach. Round 5, despite having only 2 teams on the double, seemed like a massive one. We had upsets, some huge comebacks, surprising SuperCoach scores, and some very, very impactful injuries. Here's how I went for the round: 341 all out. Like most, I brought in the must-have PJC, put the captaincy on him, and he rewarded us all soundly with 85 points for the week. Sam Menenga was underwhelming, but he did still beat his break-even, and he's got back-to-back doubles. Jack White had a bit of a poor game by his standards, but it was one of those almost games. Some turnovers that probably wouldn't normally happen. He should have double-doubled. So I think he's definitely fine for their 3 doubles in a row starting this week. We made the right call to bench Cam Oliver, who just really looks out of sorts in that Kings lineup as of late. Our Cheap Hawks duo had another great game, and it looks like Henschel might get a bit more opportunity for us. That leads us into some of the massive news from the weekend, starting off with the injury to 4-time MVP Bryce Cotton. The incident looked pretty innocuous, and there's no concrete news, but reports saying that he could miss multiple rounds because of it. With their juicy schedule to come, some cheap options really could step up. Speaking of cheap options, we might have some more because unfortunately the Phoenix will be without Derek Walton Jr. for 3 weeks with a hamstring injury. Anyone brave enough to go for Sobey? Or perhaps his teammate that burnt many of us early in the year, Angus Glover. Another key guard, Shea Illy, is going to be missing both games this week with that calf injury. Delhi is now a solid potential option if you need a guard. After a pretty small round 5 with only 2 teams on the double, round 6 is where the schedule really starts to open up. We've got 6 teams on the double in Cairns, Illawarra, Melbourne, Southeast Melbourne, Sydney, and New Zealand. And of those 6 teams, all but Cairns and Illawarra have at least back-to-back doubles, and Southeast Melbourne and United both have 3 doubles in a row. With all that in mind, let's take a look at some potential trade options in our buy, sell, keep, and avoid segment. Buy are players that I think are good options to trade in if you don't already have them. Sell are players that I think are options to trade out if you do own them. Keep are players that are being traded out by others, but I think you should consider keeping. And avoid are players that are being traded in by others, but I think you should consider avoiding. Kicking things off with our buy, Matt Hurt. Now, this one probably seems pretty obvious seeing as he's the most traded in player, and I'm very happy for us all to jump on him. He's shown he can put up numbers, and I think he also has a decent floor. With Derek Walton Jr. out, he should have to carry a bit of a decent load offensively. And with their upcoming opponents over the next 3 weeks, there should also be plenty of boards up for grabs. Speaking of their schedule, one reason that I really like Hurt and have had him penciled in for quite some time this week is that he can transition straight to one of the Brisbane bigs after their 3 doubles when their run really kicks off. Sell, the Adelaide 36ers duo. This one is pretty easy, despite serving us very well and both going out with a bang. The 36ers now have 6 singles in a row. With plenty of great options to bring in, it's time to farewell the star duo from Adelaide. Keep, Elijah Pepper. With the injury to Bryce Cotton, Pepper will undoubtedly get more opportunity. Now, I'm not saying he's going to score as heavily as Cotton could, but we've seen that he can get some solid SuperCoach numbers and will only keep growing in confidence as the season goes on. They have 5 doubles in a row starting next week, and he's got a very achievable break even this week. I'd be holding on to the Spice Man if I had him. Avoid. Maybe controversial, but Max Darling. First of all, we want to shout out Dave, or DVG, the reigning champion who brought him in last week. Absolute genius stroke move, got him cash gen, but I think that was the week to do this move. Yes, he had a fantastic game, but it was by far the best of his career. He actually doubled his total points scored in the NBL in just 1 game. If the Breakers didn't have the back-to-back singles in rounds 8 and 9 coming up, I'd probably rate this move, but I just don't think he will be able to keep going anywhere near the rate he did on the weekend. However, if Mojave King and Mitch McCarron are out this week as rumored, and if Lopez isn't back into the lineup, I would be quite happy to take the punt on Darling, especially if it helps facilitate your other moves. I don't think he's the priority move this week though. With 6 teams on the double, we actually have a lot of good options for captaincy this week with a couple of standout guys. Starting things off with last week's main man, Parker Jackson Cartwright. Now we know he can fill the stat sheet. His points and assists have been fantastic his entire NBL career, and he's also been chipping in a few steals to help beef up the total. Even some great rebound numbers last week as well. To start off this week, he comes up against the Phoenix, who he just had a 51 on. So that's a bit of nice comfort before Bullquall and the Kings in Game 2. If Mitch McCarron's out, PJC will also have to shoulder more time at the point as well. So hopefully that means more points for us. Speaking of the Kings, next up is Xavier Cooks. He has started this year brilliantly and doesn't look like slowing down at all. He comes up against the Cottonless Wildcats with Pinder in all sorts, and then the Breakers at home. He's going at nearly 1.5 points per minute and is the leading SuperCoach scorer for a reason. I'd be very happy to have the C on him. They're the clear top two, but a couple of other pod options I like this week are Matt Hurt. As I mentioned earlier, Hurt has been getting it done. He's shown a pretty consistent game, and with the extra offensive load, I think he will be a very serviceable captain, especially if he's the best option you've got. Finally is the big pod play that I brought up on the SuperCoach Hub podcast earlier in the week, Trey Kell. The MVP candidate had settled in at the Hawks nicely, and they have some great matchups this week. Yes, that does include the best defensive team in the league, United, but they are without their best defender in Shaili. After that, he goes up against his former team and terrible defensive lineup of the Phoenix. They only have one double, so it is a massive pod play to even own him, let alone captain him. But if for some reason you've got him already, or you really want to go against the pack, he's my smoky pick for the week. Now looking at my team, last week I had the stock standard moves of PJC and Menenga in for Kendrick Davis and Kyron Galloway. It would have been nice if Menenga got a bit more output, but I think that comes. He's getting plenty of opportunity and he's just not quite getting the ball bounce his way. For this week, I'm still undecided, as per usual, because there's quite a few options. All I know is that Trez has to go, and we thank him for his services. He most likely goes to Hurt, so I can run that strategy I mentioned earlier with the Brisbane crossover at the end of his double stretch. But not having Cooks the next 2 weeks is very scary. There's a world where I can bring them both in, but it will require me using my second boost and taking a bench punt on either Tom Vodanovic or Michael Harris without Cotton. Or the flip side, I get rid of Rob Edwards and then I have to play someone like an Angus Glover on court, which if he's going to run point for the Phoenix, that could be a viable option this week. It might be a bit too aggressive though. But speaking of aggressive, the other play could be going Rob Edwards down to Nathan Sobey and using the money that brings to get Trez up to one of those forwards. That's a very dangerous play though. The third and probably most sensible option is a bench downgrade for cash gen and Trez goes up to one of those two big guys. Let me know down below what your plans for the week are. Thank you so much everyone for tuning in. Hopefully this has helped with your teams leading into round 6. If it has, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Big thanks to everyone that has so far this year. We're really pushing towards that 100 sub mark. If you've got any questions, feel free to leave them down below, or you can reach me on Twitter at X at @fantasyphoenix_. Also, don't feel discouraged if you had a good week, but yet your ranking didn't increase or didn't reflect the score. Plenty of teams seem to have built with just the Breakers and JJs to try and capitalize on last week. So if your ranking wasn't quite what it should have been, don't worry, it's going to even out this week moving forward. Make sure to be planning ahead and keep an eye out for any last minute injury news. Good luck for round 6, and we'll see you in the next one.